I just picked this thing up from Rob. Only half an hour ago. I've driven it that long and I'm loving it. It does remind me of my old Escorts, and the 4 speeds mean that you've constantly got revs going. Somebody pulled over. I didn't realise I was harassing them. I was just having so much fun. So it's going really good. There's 2 more hours to drive across the country. I'm going to do that now. I'm going to try and do some more links in the sunshine, and I'm having so much fun. For now, here's the Range Rover, and I'll see you in a bit. You know, both sections of labour you're going to see in this episode, the Range Rover and the Esprit, very little actually is achieved. But what is achieved, I think, is really awesome. You'll see what I mean as we go through. Anyway, back to the rear of this Range Rover, and I want to start trying to get this rear cross member in. Now you see this folded up tab here that's left. That was a small piece of metal. They were the last pieces that were troubling getting the rear cross member out, and they got pretty mangled in the process of me chiseling them. I had to scratch my head about how I was going to do this because, you know, these things are up between the top of the cross member and the body of the car. Very inaccessible in terms of the welder. So what I've decided to do is I'm going to remake 2 of these, 1 for each side. Then I think I'm going to weld them onto the cross member and then plug weld them where I can onto the bottom of the goalpost. I think that's probably the best way. Before we do anything else, let's just look at how this is fitting elsewhere. This is the bottom of the boot floor, the rear of the boot floor, and this is the top of the cross member. Now I know this cross member looks rough. Here's the body mount. I actually found it in a yard lying outside when I was down getting a set of goalposts in preparation for the yellow Range Rover. It is a bit rough, but it's very solid. It's just been knocking about, so I don't mind cleaning it up because I got a very good price on it. So in it went, and it's good. I mean, it's really close. It's sitting off. I just haven't cinched it up tight, but it does fit properly. We have to remember, of course, the body mounts aren't actually in place here, and they won't be until this is all welded in. So over to the near side, and I did exactly the same thing, cut out any rotten metal, and then straighten out the mangled pieces of the bottom of the goalpost. These pieces here on the inboard sides of both goalpost bottoms were rotten. I'll replace those. And then I offered up the cross member again, checking the measurements at the ends to make sure it was going in square. So now it's time to fabricate these 2 little brackets that will go up above the cross member. Here's an old piece of steel. This is actually a new piece of steel, and the corrosion you see on it is just from the moisture in the air in the unit. I'll clean it up before anything gets painted or even welded on. So I cut out a fillet from this to make the brackets from, and over to a new vise that's come into the unit. It's not mine, but I am definitely going to be making use of it. And a small piece like this isn't too much trouble to hammer into shape in a vise. So that's what happened there. And over it went for offering up. And this is pretty good. It needs to be trimmed back though. And I tell you what happened here. Cutting out the old part of this bracket was really difficult because the angle grinder just wouldn't fit into the tight space. I had to be fairly brutal about it, and I did cut into the goalpost behind it slightly, but nothing I can't weld up later on. The knock-on effect anyway is that I ended up not doing that great a job of cutting out the old piece. I wanted to leave a nice straight line. I didn't leave a nice straight line, so what I did in the end was I cut the bracket unevenly so it matched the uneven line I've made in the bottom of the goalpost. And at the time I was feeling a bit, a little bit lazy probably, and that was fine by me. But by the time I got to the end of the job, I kind of realized, you know what, I'm really not happy with that, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that in a second. Back over to the near side to test fit the other end of that bracket because I've made it long enough that it will do both sides. We've got the same issues, but it seems good. And I noticed that in the corner of where the inner side panel meets the goalpost, we've got some rot there too, so that's going to have to come out. Inside the car, where the boot floor meets the goalpost, it doesn't actually meet it. There's a fillet, a nice big thick fillet of seam sealer that's put in here just to seal the car. It's obviously not a structural issue, this is just ease of manufacture, I suppose. And when I pulled that out on this side, I realized that it would probably be easier to cut the bottom of the goalpost, the remains of that bracket, out from above the rear floor. So I did that, and that was a large contributor to me not being happy with the job I had done on the offside. Now you saw that, didn't you? It moved. This is because I had no choice but to let the angle grinder hit the side panel of the car, and I measured it. It's only moved about 2 mil. This is not an issue. This is why people take steel box section, you know, inch square box section, and brace bodywork before they do any significant cutting like this. This is really not an issue. It's going to be very easy to push it back. So I cleaned it up as it was getting dark, and yeah, the nights are fair closing in. Just removing this last piece from the bottom of the panel. There was no spot weld in this. You see, it wasn't welded on at all. I've cut it here just shy of where the last spot weld was, so it wasn't really contributing much to the strength of the car back here. You can be damn sure it will be when I'm finished. Back inside the car, we've already seen the state that the lip is in for the boot floor, and I will replace it. And I know it doesn't look like it, but it is still giving some rigidity to the back of the car, so I left it in, given the movement we've already seen. So the next logical place to go was the rear end of these floor sections. So I started cutting out the section here. I tried to keep as much of it intact as I could to use as reference when I start templating. I talked about the angle grinder before. There's a couple of things about the angle grinder. I have the cover off it again. That is something I'm always very careful about, and I have the smallest remains of a disc that I could find in the box, so that I could get closer, get deeper into the car and cut out as much as possible. But I did have to fatigue metal in the end, you know, wiggle it to get some of it out. These zip discs, these metal cutting discs, sometimes the grinder doesn't actually grip them, or my grinder doesn't grip them. So what I used to do was cut out a piece of cardboard, like a little cardboard washer, and put it between the blade and the locking washer of the angle grinder. It took me a while to realize the smart thing to do was use the remains of an inside of a blade. So that's what I've done here, you see it. And it's just much more reliable. It doesn't kind of get worn out. And there's just a little tip, I suppose. In with a piece of cardboard to get some markings and start making a template. Onto the bench, and I need to know how long this section is so that I can straighten it out, because obviously the piece of metal I cut out will be straight and flat, but needs to have enough meat there to make these curves. So I just used a piece of cardboard and slowly bent it round the shape to get the length, and transferred that to a new piece of cardboard. Now, like I said, I need to take reference from the pieces I cut off the car, but they needed to be flattened out first, because again, they were a bit mangled from the process of dismantling. What I did was, I sat this in and I made some marks, and then I realized that I hadn't done it right at all, and a couple of these lines are spurious, so you see I put these squiggles through them just to remind myself to ignore them. And I think this template is really cool. It's just such a nice little shape to have arrived at, having made it from a flat piece of cardboard. Over to the car, and it looks pretty good. Now, what are we missing? Well, there's this little piece here at the bottom. It's the bottom end of the curve that returns round to the goalpost. And then we've got this gap here at the top. Both things are very addressable. I just leave this in here for a few minutes and manipulated a few different ways, checking each end of it and every section just to see where we are, make sure that we're not missing anything. Then back over to the bench, and this template's redundant because it needs some changes. I need to make some additions to it. So onto a new piece of cardboard, mark it out again. And again, I got it wrong. I thought I was going to do it one way, but I think the way I'm going to do it is better. So I've left more meat on this one so that it will account for the pieces that were missing in the last one. Little cut with the scissors and some more with a blade, and we remake the shape. Back to the car. And as hoped, this one is better. In fact, it's damn close to being perfect. I kind of wished that it was a piece of steel and not cardboard, because things can get lost in translation very easily between the cardboard and the steel. I just made a few marks in this for reference to go back to the bench, get the ruler, make them for real, and then do some more cutting. So here it is. This is cool. This is really lovely stuff. I mean, producing this kind of work really does it for me. I love it. It's so much fun. It just really gives you a sense of satisfaction. I make a few tweaks as I go here. I'm not going to labor the point on them. You know, it's back and forth to the bench, making a few cuts here and back to the car until I know I've got a shape that if I cut from metal, I will be able to finesse into the right shape. So over to the metal, transfer the template onto it and cut it out. Then back to the bench, put the extra markings for where the folds need to go onto the piece of metal, and then it's into the vise. And this worked out really cool. It was a bit tricky because the sections in this are quite narrow, and it's very hard on a vise. Even a piece of 1.25mm steel will become quite difficult to manipulate by hand when the distances between 90-degree bends are so small. But we struggled through, and I took it back over to grind the final bits out of it and make an incision along one of the edges of it so that I could bend it like the piece of cardboard was. And then I just bent it by hand. Really simple. I mean, you know, this steel is very malleable in these sizes. So you see it coming together here. And you know, I don't think this looks quite as good as the cardboard, but it needs more fettling. Over to the car, and it's pretty good. I don't like the curve. It's a bit flat, that curve, but again, like I say, I'll tease it out a bit more. One of the things that you'll notice, a knock-on of this vise, which has a very vicious set of jaws in it, you see here these ripples. They're very prominent. I actually really like them. It will remind me, if I ever see it again, of how this all came to be. Anyway, you're not going to see this piece being welded into the car this time because I just didn't have any more time. I spent 3 days working on everything you saw here, and the total was only actually about 17-18 hours over the 3 days, but that's just the way it was. I couldn't give it any more time. And anyway, the cross member needs to go in before these things get welded in, but they need to be made before the cross member can go in. So that is your lot for the Range Rover this time. Okay, the steering's heavy, like heavier than it should be even for a car without power steering, so I'm sure there's some issues there. The doors are stiff, a lot of them, they all squeak. What else? I'm fairly sure there's no braking happening on the offside at all. It likes to send you towards the ditch every time you stamp on the brakes. But it's quite refined, it's really comfortable, and I can't complain. There's a little rev counter aftermarket here on the dash. It climbs its way to 1000 revs and stops about there, so I'd like to get that sorted because this thing is happy to accelerate from 70 miles an hour. I mean, not fast, but it's got power. I would love to know what revs it's doing though. I'm guessing at 60, 65, 70, it's probably doing 3,500, 4,000. Who knows? I want to find out. Now, the goodwill between me and Rob, you know, surrounding this car has meant that I was able to take the money that I would have spent on buying a car and invest it in being able to get decent shots like this one. I have bought a piece of equipment and I'm going to get as much use of it as I can. It costs more than this car would have cost me to buy. So that's one of the impetus, one of the reasons why I've done this the way I've done it. Plus it's just nice. It's a nice thing to do. Anyway, the Valet Pro Kit this time is going to a man called Richard Gosling in the UK because he sent me these photographs of he and his son rebuilding his Lotus 900 series. It's a 912, so it's a 2.2 litre The same engine, the same family of engines that's in the Esprit, just slightly larger displacement and a bit more power. Anyway, rebuilding it in his kitchen. He obviously has a very understanding wife. So that is definitely my kind of thing. Richard, the kit is coming to you, mate. Enjoy it, and I'm looking forward to seeing that engine back in whatever it goes into. Okay, it is time for the Esprit. I didn't have a lot to do, but man, for once it was tough work. So here it comes.
3, 4.
More sexy angles. This thing just keeps on giving. I'd love to know what you think about this car. I'm not sure if it's timeless. I think it is very 70s, but then sometimes you look at it, and maybe we'll talk about this more when it's complete again, and you just think, wow, it's such an iconic, it is an iconic shape, and maybe that's the difference. Maybe I'm mixing up the iconic nature of it and timelessness. It is time to tackle this front windscreen. And I said earlier on I was going to get as much use out of that new piece of equipment as possible, and I am. So the first thing I needed to do was clean this windscreen, or else the suction cup wouldn't stick to it properly. I gave it a good wipe with a damp cloth, and then I cleaned it with proper glass cleaner. And as I went across it, I was checking it, and I did find one minuscule chip in it. I was pretty disappointed. It is absolutely tiny, so much so that I couldn't get a decent bit of footage of it. I'll show you that again, or I'll try again. Before I did anything else, the next thing I wanted to do was figure out how I was going to store this piece of glass, because I've lost a piece of glass from a car before by just not storing it properly, even though I knew that it would be knocking around for months. So I decided that the best place in the unit, or anywhere that I have access to, was up high on the wall. And I got a pair of brackets and let them onto the wall in preparation. They are, as it happens, rated for 10 kilos. I doubt the windscreen weighs 10 kilos, but you never know. Back to the glass. The first thing I had to do was take the trim out, and I really wanted to do this without destroying it, but it was so soft. The first piece I tried got completely bent, and that was the end. The top piece fought me hard. Didn't want to come out. In the end, I bent one end of it just to get a grip on it, and then it just popped out as if it had been playing with me. So the way these windscreens are done is they're actually painted. This black is paint, not sealant, and you can see it's been done on this one kind of unevenly when you see it up close. So that's all going to have to come off, and we have to mask this up nicely and repaint it before we bond it back in. But that's not going to be today or tomorrow. Like before, I pierced the sealant at the bottom with my offcut of steel, and then I tried to get a bit of wire in, which wasn't too much trouble, but it did not budge. And this is a piece of piano wire, not welding wire, very strong, very good quality, and I could not get it to cut this bonding. Whether this windscreen's original or not, I don't know, but I know it has been replaced, and it was done a lot better than the bulkhead glass. So you're going to see me struggling a lot here. This was actually at the end of one of the Range Rover days. Let's just say I wasn't fresh in terms of energy levels. So when the wire wasn't working, a buddy suggested that I use a scraper and handed me one, and I started pushing it through because I'd seen other people do this. I've actually seen machines that are essentially just a scraper with a motor on the back of it that just vibrates. And I started going around with the scraper, and by gumbo, it was tough work. My arms were absolutely hanging off me within 10-15 minutes. And I got to admit, the fact that you can see me in these shots is just out of barefaced laziness. I was just tired. And so I decided, let's not force this issue. Something will go wrong, and you're not producing nice content anyway. And I left. So back afresh the next day, and I mean mentally prepared, psyched up to do this, to do the job that I knew was going to be tough to get around the rest of this windscreen. I got stuck in. And the top wasn't too bad because the top doesn't have as thick a layer of sealant as the bottom of the glass will have. And I got down to the bottom and things slowed down dramatically. And the scraper took a severe hammering. I now owe my buddy a new scraper, which is a pity because it was a nice one. He happened to come by and I said, look dude, I have destroyed this scraper. And he said, well, you know what, seeing as it's toast, why don't you sharpen it? So I did, and it really didn't seem to make much difference at all. By the way, my gloves, I have many pairs of them, and all I really care about is keeping my fingernails clean. Most of this is from grinding. I do wear gauntlets when I'm welding now, so don't worry about it. My hands are fine. I'm just trying to keep my fingertips clean. Anyway, muddled through the bottom of the glass. Against my better judgment, I ended up doing the bottom of this glass using a hammer. Look at my furrowed brow. I look so angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm concentrating. And I got away with it. So into frame with this lovely new piece of equipment. This is a 10-inch suction cup, by the way. Pretty cool. I did try to lift this piece of glass from the side of the car flat on my feet on the floor, but it was just too much of a stretch to try and pull it up. I would have had to have done it quite violently, and I wasn't prepared to do that, even with a suction cup this big. So I got into the car from the front and lifted it out, no problem there. And the only dodgy moment was trying to stand up onto the chair to get high enough to put this windshield into the brackets. But I made it. That was the end of quite a few hours of high tension. Having a look around the windscreen now, I think there's way too much sealant here. I'm going to take advice on this, but I just think this has been really overdone. And there were a few places here too where I think it had probably come in contact with some contaminant, because the rest of it, it was very hard all the way around, most of it, like as hard as you would expect sealant this old to be, but there were a few places where it still had some life left in it. So that is the end of the windscreen episode. And if you hear piano music, that is because in the back of the unit, the buddy that I've mentioned stores pianos from his business. And every once in a while, someone will come in to look at one and they will sit down and play some nice music. So I'm very lucky to be able to say that sometimes when I'm working on my cars, I get a live show too. Alright, after some further driving, there's definitely nothing happening on the offside front brake. I actually came around a corner to find a guy on the wrong side of the road, and I must have travelled 20 metres before I could let the near side wheel spin again. I left a good old cloud of smoke behind me. The rear brakes aren't much better. I can actually hear the naked shoes rubbing off the drum, so there's some brake work to be done. It asked me for a bit of water earlier on too. I was idling somewhere and I noticed the needle was creeping up, so it didn't cook, it didn't overheat, but I'm just wondering, I'd say it probably needs a good flush for starters anyway. I want to give a shout out to some of the people who are part of the community now on Soup's Patreon page, and 5 or 6 guys shouted out to show their cars. Jose Salvado showed his 944. It looks very tidy, and I know he's done quite a bit of work on it. He has done the timing and changed the shifter out because it was a bit woolly, but he's avoiding doing the rust in the sills because I think he's a little bit scared of the job. Jose, get stuck in, pal. The worst that can happen is you have somebody else finish the job, but that is a last resort. Colin Hagan showed ages ago his 123 Benz that he had just gotten. Since then, he's pulled the whole front end out of it to kind of fix it up. So that's really cool to see. Good man, Colin. Keep it up, pal. Mark Holtham's 88 Pontiac Fiero GT is in the house with him, and as he said himself, he's got a bit of an audience here as he prepares to fight with a steering issue. So I hope that got sorted. Graham Falkard, now he says he doesn't have a classic at the moment. There's various reasons why, but it's all he can do to keep on top of his snapper ride-on lawnmower. He says it's like Frankenstein, and he has a constant guessing game what's going to fall off it the next time he takes it out, which I think is kind of funny. And the last person is Ron Hollis. Ron is a man after my own heart. 2 Range Rovers. The first one he got to take his mind off fighting cancer. So he's fit and well, and that's the good news. And what a handsome thing it is too. It's a 90 Westminster Grey 1990 Range Rover. And he's got a second one. He gave that one to his daughter. His second one he's going to go overlanding with his son in, which I think is just very cool. It's a really nice thing to do. Ron has taken on kind of a one-man mission to just do his bit to help the fight against cancer. I'm going to link to a video he's made in the description because I think it's worthwhile. Have a look there. Fair play to you, Ron. Keep it up, pal. Alright, with all that said, the feature of the episode. I didn't have a feature, and Leo Nolte, who we met in episode 10, he got wind of the fact that I was kind of stuck, and he sent me an email with a load of options, a time warp Fiat Tipo and a Lotus 7 kind of a thing that he was looking at buying himself, a 1971, registered as a Ford Escort, funnily enough. But then he said there was a 6-hour Fiesta race, endurance race coming up in Mondello Park. Why don't you come down? I'll stick you on a team. So that's what I did. I got stuck on Team Digital Gasoline as a would-be crew member, but I really just made a nuisance of myself sticking a camera in people's faces. I got really into what goes on there. I mean, obviously as a driver, you'd be into racing a car, but the team in the pits have great fun too. So here's the story.
As they get the green flag, now we're racing, ladies and gents. Mondello Mafia, Digital Gasoline, and Race Motor.
I got to Mondello Park just in time to see the cars get the green flag, and I made my way down to pit number 10. This team, Digital Gasoline, there were 10 of them, and their sole concern was to get this little silver Fiesta road car around the track as quickly as they could. And like everyone else in the pits, they were having fun doing it. And you know, as fun as it all was, it was hard not to get competitive about it. Maybe that's the nature of the beast. Anyway, when I got there, I was vaguely aware that car number 40, the little silver Fiesta, was lying in position 10. And to be perfectly honest, that was the last track I kept of what position the team was lying in. I was just interested in watching every time the car came back in for a pit stop. Anyway, the first person you're going to see is the last person I got to talk to just when people were starting to fill up the bar. It's time to meet the man who put it all together.
My name is Colin Lewis. Team is Digital Gasoline, number 40, Silver Fiesta, Nicole Drag, Colin Lewis, Sean Doyle.
I'm a civilized one, Plato's son.
So my name's Sean Doyle, 23 years of age. I raced in the European Le Mans Series last year with Murphy Prototypes, the only Irish team to ever compete in the 24 Hours of Le Mans. And I'm after winning a race in Spa in the Masters, the FIA Masters Championship, so in an LMP2 car outright.
I'm Nicole Drought, I'm 23 and I'm from Rossgrey in County Tipperary. I've been racing, this is my 3rd year racing now. For the first 2 years I raced in Irish touring cars, and I was the first lady, I believe, to win in the Irish touring cars. I was also nominated Young Driver of the Month by Motorsport Ireland, and I was also the first lady to be nominated as well, so hasn't been a bad 3 years into motorsport.
So the 3 of us driving, it's 45 minutes each driver, and it's basically to try and find the best strategy possible to be in the pits for as little time as possible, which is difficult with damage and fuel and driver changes, so there's a lot to go on before you get to the end.
It's an endurance race and anything can happen, so the most important thing is to stay consistent, and hopefully our strategy will pull us through and pull us up a couple of places.
The main thing is with the Fiesta, it's not a race car, it's about being consistent, and it's about using the track correctly, it's about being smart, okay? And it's tricky to get it right every single lap, so it trains you to be inch perfect every time. If you're all over the place, you will not do good lap times. So it's a great entry point, and it's cheap to use. The cars are cheap, the parts are cheap. The main thing is you got to buy a decent set of tyres, spec set of tyres it's called.
I think that this is the best kind of entry into motorsport is the Fiesta class. You know, they're probably the most affordable class to enter, and you know, by the way, there's so many novices out here today, and I mean, it seems to be the way to enter, and they are great fun, I have to say. I wasn't sure what to expect because any other car that I've driven has been much quicker, but they handle great, and I've really enjoyed it. So
it's pretty viable to go in cold and go do it. You learn the hard way though in the long distance races. With the long distance races like this, require strategy, they require spare parts, and they require a team to be able to work together and to know how to make that work. And there's always hiccups in the way because that's motor racing.
Yeah, I think we're doing okay. We dropped back a bit in the first pit stop. It was just the first time everyone's worked together, so it was a bit different. The second pit stop was much better, and I think we're doing well. Steady pace, and I think that's very important, to keep a steady pace, and we should keep going well.
Basically, reliable people, friends, people I know, people who are somebody I can trust, and that's what I got with Nicole and Sean.
It's my first time to race in an endurance race. I mean, I've always wanted to do the Fiesta endurance, and this year I kind of said, no matter what, I definitely want to try get out at the end of the year, and it's been so much fun. Like, it's probably the most enjoyable race of the year.
It's just different people, a few different friends come in just to help out. Kind of, we've run it ourselves this weekend, so it's a big jump, and a lot of help from Leo and all his guys.
Yeah, after 3 years of working out where we went wrong before, I worked with another team, Murray's, over the last few years, and I saw that everything happened every time with mirrors and lights, okay? And in fact, you can never have enough mirrors and lights and petrol caps for a Fiesta. Never. It's always the same 3 things go wrong, aside from the driver going wrong.
Obviously I like speed. As you go fast, you don't really notice the speed. So in the LMP2 car, things just happen so quick that you just deal with it and it happens. And it's something as a driver you adapt to as you're going around, I suppose. Today, I really enjoyed that first half of the race because we were bumper to bumper. I think 8 or 9 of us were in a line, so it was really fun. That's what I liked.
There's a team of drivers and we're all kind of working together, and I like that. And we were sitting down yesterday and trying to go through strategy and stuff like that. And yeah, it's just really enjoyable to have like a team of drivers, and we can discuss things, and if there's something getting to us or if there's something wrong with the car, someone else can confirm it and stuff like that. So I think that's it, and it's been great crack, and that's the most important thing. Exactly. Yes. It was tough going, but I mean, I didn't think I'd last. I thought I was going to be more tired, to be honest, but I was happy enough when I saw the in on the pit board. But no, it was good fun, and it was good adrenaline rush as well, so that's what kept me going kind of for the 45 minutes.
Just a tiny bit. I still get a good buzz. I really enjoy coming in, doing the pit stops and making sure it's all right, and doing your belts. And I really enjoy that kind of stuff, and it's good fun. It's the end of the year. Everyone's in good buzz, good form. Obviously it's competitive, we all want to win, so you have a bit of laugh with the guys and stuff, but yeah, it's good fun. It's a 4.5 litre V8 Nissan K45, VK45 engine, so it's out of an American truck. About 500 brake horsepower, the car weighs about 900 kilos, capable of speeds of over 200 miles an hour, and it produces more downforce than a Formula 1 car at 100 miles an hour. It's 1.25, they're meant to be pretty standard. Different brake pads, roll cage obviously, racing tyres, that's really it. Track day tyres actually, it's not even race tyres, so you can drive those tyres on the road.
It's 600 to enter this particular race. Okay, it's typically 250 to enter a race normally, 15-minute race. To buy a car, it's a couple of grand, $2,000 maybe. Make sure it's ready for the road. If you do it yourself, it costs you nothing. If you can't do it yourself, maybe a couple of £100, 300 or 400 or 500 quid. And then you're pretty much good to race. You need your tyres. Tyres are about 600 quid, and you have 3 sets for a season, so you're looking at maybe $2,000 a year in tyres. So motor racing is expensive, I have no doubts about it, but you're up and running for a season probably for 5,000. That's correct. If you take, say, you want to deliver a race and win all the time, you probably will need to spend a lot more than that. Some people here are spending thousands to gain an extra second on lap.
Yeah, there has to be, to get through sometimes. Just a small bit, just to get through, because everyone's so nip and tuck. I find our cars a little bit down on power compared to some of them, so you just have to hang on to the back of them and keep going, keep pushing.
Absolutely not. No, I just drive, so. Really, yeah, it was, I mean, everyone has the same power, and you know, that's the most important thing, and everyone's having a bit of crack. You know, I was, one of the guys I know, VW Vinny, he was behind me for a majority of the race, and I was just telling him I could see the white of his eyes right behind me, because the cars were so similar. It was just such great racing, and you know, we both high-fived afterwards, so you know, that's so, you know, everyone kind of getting on and stuff like that.
Is that what everyone knows him as, VW Vinny?
VW Vinny, yeah. He works in a Volkswagen garage, so that's his name. I don't know him from anything else, so if anyone asks me, that's VW, like, so. I'm actually not too sure. I can't even remember what position I was in when I got in. It's so hard to tell because you don't know who you're racing against or who's you've lapped, or you know. But at the moment, any car that I see, I'm just trying to hunt them down and pass them. I think at the moment we're about P12, but I'm not 100%. It's kind of changing a lot, so we're up and down. So.
The racing continued into the early hours of the late afternoon, and I had lost all track of what position Team Digital Gasoline were in, until they had a run of bad luck and the car came in for what you could only describe as an extended stop. And here's Colin with the last word on how the day went.
We've had our hiccups today. We've had car spin in front of us and hard to avoid it. We've had issues with our petrol cap, and we had a bit of a bash on our front light, all of which has eaten into our time. We had a very good strategy lined up, we had a very good team lined up, but when the crunch comes, it's all kicked in, and we're now P23, it'll look like a P20. Strategy played through would be top 5.
What do you think happened today?
Well, first of all, a car spinning in front of us and impacting them meant we got a front puncture, damaged our lights, damaged our wing mirror. That took maybe 10 minutes, 10 laps, you're out of the race. Okay. In a race like this, although it's 6 hours long, it's still a sprint. People are doing the same lap times they do in a 15-minute race. They don't show no mercy on the car. Consistency is what would have won this race. If you can deliver 113, 114 the whole time, you're consistent, you're in good shape.
You know, if they did that endurance race 4 or 5 times a year instead of just once, I would be all over that with a group of buddies. That was so much fun and intriguing to see the dynamic between the drivers and the pit crew and how everything comes together. All right, my patrons: Alex McAllister, Andrew Treble, Graham Fockhart, Joseph Bennell, David Powell, Randy Cox, who upped his current pledge, Richard Gosling, Richie Johnson, Ron Hollis and Tom Jarvis. Guys, you and all the other patrons, you are paying for this shot. And I love it. And I know it's not perfect, and the shots haven't been perfect with this new setup, but it's a learning curve. I've got to get my head around it, and I'm very excited about doing more stuff out on the road, which is where all of this is going ultimately anyway, and I'm very excited about that. This car is surrounded in good faith and good vibes, and it's going to bring nothing but goodness to Soup. It's going to be a lot of fun. Even if it has a massive hissy fit and a terminal meltdown, it will still mean good things. It's not going to do that, by the way. It does need a few little bits of TLC here and there. That's probably putting it mildly. But I want to make the point that if you haven't noticed already, I've been ill through this episode. That's by the by. This car made me forget that. Anytime I've driven this car, it's just bliss. I don't know what I was doing without a classic car for over a year. It's like a piece of me is back now, so I'm very, very excited. Rob, you're a legend. Thanks, mate. I'll do her as much justice as I can. And in the meantime, all you guys, you've got to do the same thing. Follow your passion. Get that car out on the road. If it's not on the road, put it on the road if you can. If you need to work on it, work on it. Either way, you will be having so much fun, I guarantee it. All right, that's it for episode 14. It was a tough one. They're all a tough one. It's all good. I will see you next time. Good luck.